So, welcome back to the channel. Last time we worked on this bike, I had put the forks back together, and some of you commented that that was a pretty silly idea knowing that the forks were sticking. I had to get it back together because I had to take this bike to our local motorcycle group's tech day, because the subject of that day was going to be rebuilding and servicing Bing carburetors. Now, of course, the R100 series of this vintage has good old Bing carbs, and although I've rebuilt Honda and Yamaha carbs from the 60s and 70s, I hadn't done a Bing, so I figured it'd be a good idea to take advantage of the opportunity to bring this bike down. So the video you're about to see is the presentation by Bruce Howes, who just provided an excellent in-depth I guess it's more of an overview, not too in-depth, but it is an hour-long video just about what to look for as you approach servicing and refurbishing these now 40-plus-year-old carburetors. So I hope you enjoy the video. I hope it's useful. I think it's a good reference and a good walkthrough. And as always, please subscribe. It'll really help me keep doing this.
Carburetor is just a way to introduce fuel to the engine, right? So, and it's a way to introduce atomized fuel to the engine. Most bike carburetors are a slide type carburetor and you see those on like the R90S's, right? Where you have a slide that goes up, it's attached to your cable. The Bings are what's called a constant velocity carburetor, which is sort of in some ways similar to an automotive because you have this little throttle plate, regulates the vacuum that's in this body here, and that causes that slide to go up and down, and we'll see how that works. But the neat thing about a Bing carburetor, when you have a regular carburetor like you see on a car or a bike, once you set it up, you're set up for the static conditions of temperature, pressure, things of that nature. We would, in the aviation world, it's called density altitude. You might have heard that. Long distance shooters know density altitude as well, which is atmospheric pressure, it's humidity in the air, and it's temperature. So it works, but it's not dynamically adjusted. So if you go to higher altitude, your carb is not going to be, in theory, jetted correctly. But by a constant velocity carburetor works a little differently. And a constant velocity carburetor works by varying the amount of fuel by sliding this little plunger, this little slide up and down, right? So that's a neat thing about the Bing. So you can use the other carburetor, it works fine. This is just a nice German refinement of that. So can you guys see this okay? Okay. So I thought the easy way to do it, You've had yours apart or not had yours apart yet? Okay. Bob, have you had yours apart?
No, I have not.
Okay. All right.
I bought the rebuild kits as we talked about.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So if you can do these on the bike. It's difficult, but you can leave it in place and do a lot of especially the O-rings on the bike. But if you're taking it off, this is one I took off my 91 100 GS, and this bike had some chronic starting issues and running issues, particularly when it was cold. So I took this off and I used a carb cleaner. I sent you the information, a chem tool. Yeah. And dunk the carb in there. You disassemble it, dunk it in there. And we'll talk more about that. But I'll show you how this works. So basically, this is your inlet to the engine, the smaller diameter, right? And this is where we get the diameter for the tool, right? So this is exactly, this is a 32. Your information on Bing, so you know you have the right carburetor, is actually right here. It's stamped in this area, so you're ordering the parts. So if I look at this one, this is actually a 64 series. You're probably 94s, I think, on yours. And 32, so it says 64/32. 32 is the diameter. And then 359 and 358. And that tells you the unique jetting configuration. So when you're working on one of these and you're going through it and you question how to set it up, you just whip out your handy Bing book and you go through here and you go, okay, where's the specifications for that? I think it's near the back here. Give me a minute. All the shop towel stuff. And you will find your settings for everything, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Here we go. It's actually in the front. So we just you can look it up by the model of the bike in this book, or I can look it up by the carburetor. So this is a 6432 358, and all my settings from everything from the idle speed, from the idle mixture screw to the jets for the slide to the main jet, all those things are all listed in here. So if you take it apart and you want to say, hey, is this really the correct carb for my bike, or somebody monkeyed with it, you can kind of look at that. So these will come apart pretty easily. I'm just going to use this little tray. And most of them are a Phillips on the top. Some of them are a Allen. You'll find that kind of used in there. Sometimes these screws get seized. This one's been apart and done by me, so it should be fairly free. And I'm just going to loosen those up. And then what you want to do, take this spring off here. And this spring is for the cold start enrichment. I'm a big fan of these little trays.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
things don't run away?
yeah, so things don't run away. I take them apart generally in something like this.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah.
For us non-mechanics, I
Yeah.
buy the little cardboard
You can do
trays
that?
you use for food
Yeah.
service. You
Yeah.
buy 100 of them for $10 or whatever, and then I can just
Put all your parts
some
out.
Of them, some of them are divided, like, you know, the bigger trays are divided too, so you can
Yep.
put parts in different places, and then you throw
Yep.
them out when you're done.
That's
And
another way of doing it.
Where do you get these?
These are actually sold online. This guy was an aviation mechanic that came up with these grip mats. So this thing is very, very sticky. As a matter of fact, if you have any dampness on here, it's tough to pull it off. But you can take this and lay this on the hood of a car or an aircraft, hold your tools. I use it just as a rebuilding bench. I have a workbench with a rubber, actually anti-static material for electronics. But I use this when I'm tearing something apart because it does kind of capture all the parts, right? So if we're going to take this part, we have the spring off, so we're going to take this top cover off. And this is something, and the way I work, I usually put all the hardware in one compartment. I'm kind of familiar with it now. If you are not super familiar with it, you can kind of just have a couple different trays or Ziploc baggies. I'm a huge fan of Ziploc baggies. And you can put those in there. So this is what this looks like when you take this apart. So this is the cover, and this is the throttle body here. So what you want to look for on these when you first disassemble it is you want to look at this diaphragm and make sure this doesn't have any holes or perforations. And if you have any holes or perforations in this, you won't have vacuum, so this won't rise up on its own. So that diaphragm is actually good because I had changed this recently. I've gone through here. This is your metering needle. I'll talk more about that in a second, but we'll take this complete carburetor apart. So metering needle, this is a spring that is a dampener. Some of the early ones didn't have these in there. This basically is kind of a little bit of a counterbalance to make sure it goes back down. The other thing to look for is scoring on this piston, this slide right here. This one's not scored. The other one I took apart did have some scoring in here, and I had some scoring in the carb body, which if I use my magic phone.
Sliding up and down inside.
Yeah, and then debris getting in there and things about that.
So is that debris that gets by the air filter?
It could be debris got by the air filter. It could maybe some material in the fuel. Anything like that's going to do that,
Okay.
you know. And this is not really. Let me turn my light off so I don't have a dead phone. This is not really lubricated with anything. It's kind of indexed with the needle valve.
Okay.
And in theory, it's indexed with this diaphragm. If you notice on this diaphragm, there's a little tab right here. See that right there? That actually matches up.
It's almost like a sleeve that goes.
Yeah, this is actually a slide that goes up and down that regulates the fuel flow. And that index is in there. And there's a likewise index on the other side of this diaphragm, which I'll show you. So when this is put together, this is clamped down. So this has the proper relationship. You can see that's machined. You don't want it that way. You want it so it'll go up. So when you're taking these apart, so I look at that. This is actually a new slide. I felt that wasn't deep enough, that I was worried about it, but I had wear on the slides and they're replaceable. And you guys probably know all about the different size screwdrivers. Make sure you find one that fits, not too sloppy, right? So these generally are not super tight. You can just hold this and these will come out. These are not Loctited or anything. No, the only place you might see Loctite on these carbs is on these enrichment screw covers. And let me just pop this other one out.
There's not a lot of stress on that to
No,
really require.
and they have a little lock washer on the screw, which is captive. So if you look at these, you'll see there's a little lock washer on those.
Yep.
Yep. And so, and again, you know, when you do, there's various ways of thinking of rebuilding a carburetor. In my opinion, just, you know, having done car stuff, European car stuff for 40 years, if I'm taking it apart, I'm going through it completely, right? I'm probably not going to go, well, let me just change this one thing. I'm kind of a buy once or cry once, buy once, cry once type of guy, you know? So go big or go home. And so, again, my process of doing this is just something I've learned over the years. Is I keep all the screws grouped together. If I'm, we got somebody, good. That's a pretty bike. That's a very pretty bike. So my strategy, I guess there's a couple of different things we were talking about earlier about my strategy
What do you like in it? Okay.
when I take something apart is if I'm not familiar with it, I always put the screws left to right, like because we all read left to right. So first screws here, second screws here. That's another strategy. I've had these apart enough. I usually just throw everything in a bin. So once that's done, this comes off. That little collar comes off. And this is not indexed other than through the screws. There's no indexing on that. But you'll notice on this, and when this comes up, we'll find it here. There it is. Okay. There's our little tab right there, and I'll pass that around. So you can see that's a pliable diaphragm. When they get older, they get kind of gummy and hair. And we saw these, I used to see these in British cars, right? And actually some early Volvos have those too. So when this goes together, you just need to make sure this little tab goes in the slide correctly, and you're done. So I'm going to set this aside. So in here is this needle, right? So we want to take this apart, and we want to, using my magic screwdriver, I'll see if this actually, I have even a better tool than that for this. I have a little wider one, which should work a little better. There we go. In here is a little flathead screw. There's no adjustment screw. Screws just bottomed out. These also sometimes will have a little bit of blue Loctite on them. If you get them new from Bing, they do. You know, that's just an aluminum screw with a little blue Loctite on it, right? Nothing magical. But one side has the flathead, and the other is uniquely shaped to go down over this little needle and hold this in place in the slide. So nothing really, we looked at this, we said there's no wear, we would clean this up normally. The needle jet, and my eyes are not good, so I wear a visor when I'm doing these. The needle, you want to look for any wear, burrs, anything like that. You'll notice on that needle there's a circlip, and there's a series of little slots so you can put it in different positions, okay? That's why the book is helpful. So if I was taking this apart and said, hey, is this thing set up even correctly? You know, I can go in here and I can say, okay, this is a 6432, and this should be on needle clip position 3, which if I use this, I go 1, 2, 3. So that's in the right position. So if this looks good, I'm going to reuse this. If it needs to be replaced, I'm going to replace it. So that is the slide
When you
for that. Go ahead.
take these apart and
Yep.
then dip them in the can, because I bought a gallon of
Yep.
that to use, do you take it all apart and put all of
I
it
do.
in, including the
Yeah,
jets, needles, everything?
everything. I put everything in there. I go, some people don't take out this, and I'm not going to take this out now because these are peened over. Some people don't take out this butterfly shaft,
Right.
but there's no ring in it, so if you put it in there, you need to.
Right.
I think it's a good idea to do it if you've never, you know, it's kind of one of those things, if you don't know,
So
that's
you
new.
would take it all the way apart.
I would, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anything rubber, the carb cleaner will eat.
Right,
Yeah,
but I
it'll-
assume the rebuild kit has all new rubber.
It has all in
seals
it.
and
Yep,
gaskets
exactly.
and all that.
It has all that stuff in it. So, so that's the top. So that's, I usually after that point I go here. I pop the bottom float bowl off. Thing to look for on here, there's a couple things. One is any corrosion inside here. This is where you're going to see ethanol. This is actually a new float bowl. I'll pass that around, and we'll talk a little bit about what's in there. Yeah,
Shiny.
yeah. My original float bowl had corrosion in it, and I scraped it, and I said, you know, I think I'm doing this correctly. Let me do it. You notice that little standpipe in there that comes up? Yep, right there. that little standpipe actually attaches, see that? Actually attaches to that hole. And so, and you want to make sure if you have a torch tip cleaner or you want to blow solvent through, you want to make sure that's open. That actually is an overflow, so if your float sticks, it'll drip out the bottom of the carb, so you know if you have a sticky float. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing, in here in this corner, and I'll pass this back around, there's a little metering jet. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, in the hole.
Yeah. And that is a metering jet for the cold start enrichment circuit. And because they're in the bottom of the
hole at the bottom.
Yeah, yep. And so
Sucks stuff up.
yes, exactly. That's what this pipe does right here. This works with a cold start. I'll spin this around. We'll talk a little bit more about that because I had a lot of problems with mine. I spent a lot of time understanding how it worked. That's what this goes in that little well. So there's a little, yep, go ahead. There's a little well right there. And you can check this in a couple ways. You see there's a little hole here. So you can take solvent and blow through there with a carb cleaner. That's probably the easiest way because you blow air, you can't see air, but I can see solvent coming out. The other thing is some of the later ones, you can actually take this right out, and this is a little flathead, and it's actually removable.
But not all of them.
Yeah, the early ones are not. So later ones are. I don't think Bing sells this as a replacement part, but you can see that that hole in that is tiny.
What year would be early?
I don't know. I know on the ones I've been working on, which have been the late 80s, 90s, they've all been repairable.
I think mine are 358, 359s.
Yeah, that's a common, yep, R80, R100s. This is, I don't know if you guys have seen, people call these torch tip cleaners, the carburetor. So these are little cleaners that you can use, and we'll talk about these a little later, but if you have one of those that's plugged, it won't blow solvent through it. You don't want to start with the largest one, start with the smallest one, work it through there, work it gently. You don't want to enlarge the opening in the brass, you just want to open it up. But this is a nice little kit. You can buy these things, they're fairly inexpensive, $10 or so. And they have a bunch of different tips on them. In cutting torches, when we did a lot of cutting and welding, we used to use those to clean out cutting torches. So that's an important piece to be in there. I'm going to put this in here so I don't forget about it or lose it. We'll drop it back in, and
I couldn't see it very well, but it looked like it had a size stamped on it.
I think it does. Yeah, I should have brought a little magnifier. I can use my phone. I don't believe I saw that as a replacement item. This is the parts list from Bing. And I don't believe they list it as a replacement item. I think they just sell the float bowls. I think were around $35. They weren't terribly expensive.
And the float bowl has that in it when you buy it.
What's that, sir?
So the float bowl would have that in it.
Yeah, it has it in it. It has the little standpipe in it. Yeah. So the only things I really think about on the float bowl is I look for corrosion. I say, is there corrosion in here? There's no corrosion. Is the little overflow tube open? And that should be open. That's also believes it serves as a vent. And then is this little well clean? And is that little metering jet clean? They're the important things. Next things I think about, I'm probably not going to pull it out here because I don't want to, I don't have a small little punch. But this is the pin here for the float. And one thing you'll notice on these, and I can pass this around, is you'll see that one end of the pin is knurled. And it's sticking out. Do you see how that's kind of sticking out? So when you want to change the float, you want to make sure you identify which side is knurled and go that way. Yeah, like in the firearms world, it always goes from right to
through.
Exactly. And that's important. And if you don't know, but if someone's pushed that in all the way, I leave them sticking out of it so I can tell. And I always do it from the same side. But if you don't know, start tapping it and look at the end of it, right? And if you see knurling, then push it that way. But if you don't, do the other way, because otherwise you'll be driving it right through the casting, and then it'll be.
It actually could go in the other way. Yeah.
I'm not going to take this out, but if we were going to take the float out and look at the little needle valve, we'd drive that through there, and that would come right out. But we are going to take a look at some other things. So this is where our little toolkits work very well.
I like your little tray.
You like this tray?
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. They're nice. So
Amazon?
this grip mat. Go online. I don't know if Amazon sells them.
Grip mat?
GRPMAT. Yeah. Bob and I both have these little Moto Hansa kits, which are designed to be on your bike, but I use it really for working in a workshop. So we're going to take this out, and some of the things we're going to look at, and yours will be interesting to see how yours look. So here is, and that is going to be, and I'm going to turn my little magnifier on so I can read this. So this is 135, so let's just make sure. So I'm taking these apart the first time. I always just look at it and say, hey, is this really got the right jetting in it? And so the main jet is 135 on this, so that's correct. This is the main jet holder, and this is always interesting to look at. All the ones I've taken apart, you'll see a couple things here. I'm going to knock this out. You see that brass piece down in there?
The one that just fell out?
Yep. There's still another brass piece in here. Okay. So that'll pop out too. And that is the atomizer for that. So see how that has little holes in it? Mm-hmm. It's important that actually go back in the right direction. This is, again, something to look at. This is probably a 266 or 268. Let me take a look here. I should have brought my visor, guys. This is a 268, and that's our needle jet. And let's verify. Yeah, so the needle jet on this is 266. Interestingly enough, on that's an R100 GS. On an R80, it's 268. But I've changed these. Seth told me from Bing that they've enriched these up, and they suggest it to run a 268 in it. So this one got changed. So this goes together in here, and this is where a diagram is useful if you have a question of how it goes, to make sure it goes together. So when you're putting this back together, this has to go in a particular order. What some people do is they put this backwards and then they force this up in the car body and damage it, but we'll leave that like that for right now. So this is the main jet holder. Things to look for on this is the O-ring. You'll find a lot of these O-rings are very deteriorated. I'll pass that around. It's a nice heavy piece of brass. You can buy those as new parts. I actually have some with me. And if I get them out and they're nasty or dirty.
So that O-ring can wear?
Oh yeah, the O-ring gets very gummy.
Okay.
They'll get brittle. A lot of times when you try to take these off, they'll just break.
Really?
Yeah, they're just from the heat of it. So so we'll leave that there. So that's that. Now we're going to get into the idle jet. And again, you guys, you'll have to visualize. I took the floats out of here, but and this is also another thing you want to look at for O-ring. Idle jet, little O-ring on that. You want to make sure that's okay. If that's not intact, if you're rebuilding it, you certainly want to replace it. I'm just taking this apart as it's already been rebuilt. This you want to look at. You'll see all little small holes that are designed to bring air up in there and atomize the mixture. So
I had a buddy who does this, and he uses like almost like paper clips or something, with wire, and goes in and out to clean those orifices.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea. I use solvent. I try not to use anything that's going to enlarge them.
I think he uses like pipe cleaner or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
A lot of times I just spray these out with solvent. I literally take. I don't want to make a mess.
Break that down enough to clean it out.
Most of the time it will. I spray these out with solvent. You can just fit that in there, spray it out, and then I'll throw these in my solvent tank too.
So you got an ultrasonic cleaner? You ever heard of that?
I don't have an ultrasonic cleaner for this application. Most of the time they're just gummy, and I do it. But that's not a bad idea to do too. So that's that. The next things are going to come off. This is the vacuum takeoff. See that little screw?
Just plugged in.
Yeah, yep. Some of these will have a vacuum cap. They are threaded. Some of them will actually have vacuum lines that are on here for that air injection system, which is designed to clean it up. This is pretty simple to come apart. There's just a little washer on the bottom. You notice I'm using the same screwdriver for pretty much everything on here. And all this is a screw and a little fiber washer. It's nothing magical. And the fiber washer is reusable, within reason. And then this is our mixture adjustment. And we'll take this screw out. And you'll see a little spring on top of this. And that'll fall out. Mixture screw, really what you're looking for on this is you're looking at the tip of this to make sure there's no damage on the tip. Nothing bent, corroded, sticking. I'll pass that around so you can look at that. The other thing, as we start taking this apart, is start considering those things are tapered. If it's tapered, it means there's a seat that it's going on to, right? So you want to look in there and you want to look at these passages and make sure things are clean. Yeah, so when you see a taper, you're gonna assume that it's gonna be sealing on something. So take a look at that. What I found on those mixture, not mixture, but the main jet holders, inside these threads, and you'll probably see it on yours, you'll find a lot of material, black material that builds up on that. Part of it, I think it's the O-ring. Part of it, I think it's just stuff, contamination from the fuel, probably some crankcase fumes, things of that nature. This will get all built up with material in it, and this one should be pretty clean because I cleaned it
I
out.
can't wait to see the one we take apart that's been used.
I don't know if you can see inside there.
Right?
Yeah, still
Then
got
we'll
stuff
know.
in there. Yeah. Yeah. Can you see inside there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you want to look for. Is you want to look for any of that stuff that's built up in there and clean it.
Bruce, you've already sanitized this one, though, right?
I have. I've cleaned this out. There's just going to be some residual stuff in there. It's not. It's more staining of the metal,
Yeah,
than
okay,
anything
yeah.
else. Yeah, there's not anything in it. So we're almost done really with what we can take out jet wise on this thing. The other things, I'm not going to take the main butterfly for the throttle off because then I have to take these screws off. But let's talk about that because you should do that with yours. So this is the throttle shaft. And this is the butterfly, and this is what your throttle cable connects to.
yeah,
And this opens and closes to allow air to go through it. There is a seal that's located right in here, and the only way to get that seal out is to see these screws? You have to take the screws out, and I'll show you, I'll take this off. This shaft, if you have the butterfly off, is retained by these screws here. So normally what I would be doing is I would be taking this throttle stop off so I can open the throttle up all the way. I've seen these both with and without lock washers on the bottom.
Okay.
Just something to think about.
Is it a captive lock washer?
It's not, actually, it's a good question. So it's not, which means, which means it's replaceable. So then that one's out. That is the benefit of a magnetic screwdriver. This will come out. This is a little, that's your throttle stop bracket with that, and that's for your spring for return. There's a little nylon piece in the bottom of these.
That white nylon.
Yeah, it's a little nylon. The spring grabs that. And the logic behind that is, instead of having the spring where it's constantly cycling, wearing it an angled piece of steel, and wearing the spring fatigue, and they put that in there. Interestingly enough, I bought 2 new carburetors, brand new. That's one of the box they came in from BMW. Probably have been sitting on the shelf for 30 years. 30 of them in Germany for each side. And one of them came with that, and one of them didn't. So
That's unusual.
yeah, and I thought, I don't know how that happened, but I actually I have some brackets I bought, so I did that. So this is so to show you what you have
So
to
is
do.
this NOS, new old stock?
It was. Yeah, believe it or not.
Looks like the label's a little gray.
Oh yeah, that was probably been sitting there a long time.
No kidding.
So if we were going to take this out, and I don't want to do it because of peening the screws, but I can if you guys really want to see me do it. You have to file off the screws. See how those are peened on the end? And by
So inside on this cylinder right here?
yeah, so right here, the end of this.
So what do you have to do? File
So
that
you have
off?
to file that. So by
File the peening.
yeah.
Yeah.
So by peening, what I do is I take a punch, and I just hit the end of the thread so they fold over, so it can't come out. So that's the way they come from the factory.
Jesus.
I
And that'll stay there,
these
huh?
two. Yep, because this will get sucked in the engine, so it's a pretty critical thing.
Right.
But how do you do that? I just have a little file set. It's not a big deal, and it takes 10-15 minutes, and you just you file it off, and then you carefully take it out.
Pick safes with that.
Yeah, that's
So do you peen them when you put them back?
I do. I peen them, I Loctite them. I feel like that's a safe thing to do. There are people who'll tell you just need to Loctite them. I would rather do both. What's that?
hard can you hit it? It doesn't look like you want to hit it too hard.
No, so what I do is I have a vise and I put like a little 1x2 piece of strapping lumber or timber in it, and I set that against the back of the shaft, and then I don't take a thin punch, I take a wide punch that'll deform the threads. And I just go like this. If this is it, this is sitting on my vise, the strapping is up under here, and this is supporting the shaft. And then I just take my hammer and I just go
Piece of wood.
boom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
through it,
yeah,
small
yeah,
piece.
up through and holding
And
the
it's
back
brass,
of it.
so it's soft enough that it
Yeah.
goes pretty quickly.
Yeah. These are the shaft is brass, and that's one thing when you're taking this out. I will tell you, because I ruined one of these. If you don't have the threads perfectly cleaned off, the steel screw is harder than the brass, and it will damage the brass.
Right.
You know, and you can buy these shafts; they're about $35. The other thing, if you're taking this apart, this is something that is I made a mistake on the first ones I did with this. You notice on that throttle plate it says T.
Yeah.
I scratched that in there.
Yep.
Because this
Gotta
is
put it in the right way.
yeah, it's asymmetrical,
Yeah.
and so it can go in both ways. And if you put it in the wrong way, it'll work, but you'll have a gap. It won't close off the hole. These are actually, if you were to look at these
So what
plates,
does that do? Make it idle differently? Or?
it'll have a fast idle.
Okay, yeah.
If you look at this plate is actually tapered. Can you see that?
Yep, on the edge, yep.
Yeah. So it's actually
very
tapered.
slight.
Yeah. Very, very slight. And the easy way to tell if you have these in, I'll just, just to say where we're doing this. So when I take this out and I'm putting it back together, I make sure the T's on the top. And then the fun job, which probably is the hardest thing, this whole thing, is getting this lined up. These screws, if you tighten them down tight, it can be off. It's not perfectly indexed. So what I do is I tighten them down loosely. I usually take my finger and I go in through here and I kind of play around with this, and you'll get this flap so it seals up perfectly. And if you hold it up to the light, you'll look around that thing and you'll be able to see no
When you
light
get the
around
seal
it.
and-
Yeah, so if you hold that up, that's what you're going to see. You want to see really
Very
yeah, and then as you start to open it, it should be a uniform light all the way around. That way you know it's okay.
Like a crescent moon?
That's one way of thinking of it. Yeah, yeah, that's one way of thinking of it. So, pretty critical thing to do. Once you have that all perfectly sealed, then you can tighten the screws up and pin it over. So the easy way is just hold it up to the light, make sure it's closed, you don't see any light around it. Start to open it. Is the light uniform all the way around it? Then it's centered in the bore.
So
Yeah. You see how that's centered in the bore? Yeah. Yeah. And I could do that. I'm going to take up a lot of your time if I file that down and do that. These screws are just, they're replaceable. And just to show you, I can grab some stuff out of here to show you what this. These are things that I've taken apart and saved over the years, but I'll show you with these shafts what these look like, and particularly where the O-rings go. Your seal goes on the inner one, and then the outer one actually is where this little bracket rides. So if you put it together and you push that in there and you go, the O-ring is not there, the O-ring has to go on the inside one. Simple thing, I'm just mentioning that because when I first did it, it was not apparent to me. So this is the rebuild kit as it comes from me. It's the diaphragms and it's the seals.
And even at this age, these parts are still readily available?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. So the other thing you're going to do if you went through here, I would buy screws for this, and they're available as well, or you can get some from me. I've got bags of them here. So, and these are, just basically a simple flathead screw, but they're specifically tapered to go on that. You notice how that has that, right? When I first did this, and I wasn't paying attention to the orientation of that butterfly, I thought, oh, butterfly, no big deal. I thought, oh, you just tighten these down because these will self-center, but it really does not work. You know this too, right? Yeah,
do.
yeah.
You learned the hard way?
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah, well, I didn't, but I watched somebody learn the hard
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah. So you think, oh, these are, because in
Oh, that's right. Why is this thing idling so fast? What?
yeah,
What? It won't. I can't release the idle screw enough.
You can't turn the screw back enough.
yeah, you can't. So and I save all my parts. Like, I get you probably should throw
I
this
see
stuff
now.
away.
What a collection
Yeah.
here.
Well, a lot of those are new, but all my new stuff is in this bag. So I save all this stuff because that one's salvageable. I probably replace that because I think that thread was a little knackered there, but I could use that, but I save all this stuff.
You wouldn't just chase the threads out with a bat?
I was a little concerned because it's a kind of a critical screw. I could do that. I thought, you know what, the shaft's $30. My bike is probably more than $30, you know. But you're right. If you couldn't get it, I would do that, right? And you could even do something that's brass. You could do something creative like solder it, you know, and then clean it, retap it, yeah. So you could do that. So, but yes, yeah, and I'll talk to you about that. So those screws for here are a good thing to get. If I'm doing these, it depends on the condition of the carb. I usually change these screws here in the enrichment. We'll get to those in a second. I change the throttle screws. I usually put new hardware on. Hardware is cheap. I want it to look nice. You know, you're doing a complete on your bike, so you want it to do that way.
Yeah, why don't you just scribble a list down or at least.
Yeah, yep. These come apart pretty simple. Just a quick thing to show you. You notice, and yours might be different. These are just 2 stamp pieces. The back one has a hole which is not
Where the
cut.
cable goes.
Yeah, that one's that.
Why do those parts look much newer? Is it
Because I've replaced them.
Okay.
Yeah, these carbs were not in good shape when I got those. This was all corroded and everything. So I'm not going to take that out. But basically, once you have the screws out, this will pull right out, and you're all done, right? There's a little flat washer under that nut, and that's all you need to worry about. But just the orientation is important. Cameras on your phones, amazing tool. You have the other carburetor, amazing tool. I took a lot of pictures when I first did it. So we almost have this thing stripped down. This is the cold start enrichment system, which is a really cool system on this carburetor. And because I have no spring on here, I can show you how this works. So, and I'm going to pass this around, but you'll notice right here, there's a large port drilled in there. You see that hole right in there?
You can see it from the outside where the...
Yeah, where it comes through, yep. And that comes into the cold start enrichment mechanism, and it goes to another port, and it actually goes, if you look at this throttle, it actually is on the other side of the throttle. See where that is right there? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's actually an idle bypass. So so if you have the throttle closed, this is how the cold start enrichment system works. Traditionally, you'll have another flap like a choke flap on this. Bing has this very ingenious thing where they actually bring this air in through here. And again, throttle's closed, so you have a high vacuum. Throttle's closed, it's getting sucked in through here, going through here, and then this is picking up through that little pipe we talked about earlier and that jet in the bowl, all right? And when I take this apart, you'll kind of see how that is machined. These are the screws that I put Loctite on, and if you buy them new from Bing, they have blue Loctite on them. And there's a couple reasons for that. These sometimes are a little sticky. This carb has been apart, so I'm not too worried about it. You see Loctite on the screw, probably means you put Loctite when it goes back together.
Is it 242, the blue stuff?
Yeah, this is the stuff I use, the 242.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like that, they put the blue stuff in the red bottle.
It is amazing. I know.
I went looking
Yeah.
for blue the other day and said, "Wow, all I have is red. I got to go buy." Oh crap! That's
Lock
right.
it up tight. You put
Yeah, I read it was a copyright issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoever made it the first one, it was blue, and
Yeah.
the next people had to use a red bottle.
And that's a good point. Loctite has 242, 243. They've got a number of different.
They do.
And
About 30 of them if
Yeah.
you look in detail, and some of them are oil resistant and different other things.
Some
in
have
there.
different torques, you know.
some have different release temperatures. And,
Release torque, that's what
I had one of my older Bings had a problem with, and I'll talk about this too. This is under vacuum. This whole dome is under vacuum. You see this little, we want to call it a freeze plug, or we want to call it this little shiny plug. These get loose, and this is something to look for. So I actually had a carb. I think I put a video up on the RSM site. I was just taking my finger and I was going up and down with the slide. This thing was going up and down and rattling. So, but I actually had one that came loose. And talking about Loctite, I was thinking I had to change the top, and a friend of mine, Bud Proven, said, no, you can just put this green Loctite material on it. And I put it in, and the material wicks itself in, so you don't even see it. It goes right in.
Green Loctite?
Green Loctite.
I've never seen green.
I should have brought that. I have a couple different Loctites. And it's more of a permanent
So it
type
just
of Loctite.
soaks in.
It wicks itself right in. Yeah, so I just really didn't have to do much. And that fixed the calf. I mean, these are probably $50, $60, you know. But,
I hate to trash that.
yeah, so we've got, this is the cold start mechanism, and I'll show you this. So this little gasket here, your carb has this issue. these leak, and when they leak fuel. I actually have this glued on the end of it, and we'll talk about that. And this is a good way, and I like to, you can use carb cleaner, or you can just use a straw to kind of explore where it comes in, see how that comes in there. And then as far as the other side, you can kind of see, we have this here. This is a little more difficult to get in because it's got to go around, but you can see that straw coming out through the top, okay? And that's what this mechanism does. And I'll take this apart. This is the way that Bing controls the mixture, how much fuel is going in for the bypass for the cold start enrichment. So I'll take this right off. I think I might have to change
So this
my
is independent of a choke system.
This is how the choke works on this. There's no actual choke. This is actually using a system where it allows additional air and fuel to bypass the throttle to create an enrichment. So let me, and this is a little bit of a chore.
And is that done by regulating the butterfly
What's that?
somewhat? Does that regulate the butterfly?
No,
Is that all we do?
yeah,
That's the whole way?
yeah. As a matter of fact, if you open the butterfly, you defeat this system.
Okay.
It
that's what I
won't,
wondered.
it won't have enough vacuum to pull through. So these are kind of interesting. There's an O-ring in here you want to change anyway, but I'll put this here. So you have that. Again, the levers, pay attention to the orientation of the levers, they do matter. And then this piece, these are a little bit of a bear to pop out. That'll pop out. And that's an O-ring you want to change, okay? This is actually a very clever system. This is spring-loaded. And if you look, there's a series of small little holes, these little orifices that are drilled from small to large. I'll pass that around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's something you want to check and make sure they're open. So as you operate the choke from 0 to half to full on,
There's some smaller.
yes, yeah. So those orifices will actually go
Cool.
in front of these ports. So that controls the amount of fuel that gets pulled in for enrichment.
It's a machine.
So is this
system.
activated by your choke?
By your choke lever. Yeah, yep, by your choke lever. Yep, exactly.
Because I notice it's independent.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll share something I've kind of discovered. So I have a Bob's seen my bike. I have a 91 R100 GS Bumblebee Black with the yellow.
Oh, I love those.
Terribly cold-blooded. These carbs came off it, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I called Bing, and I talked to Seth, and he told me to call his rebuilder, an older fellow, very, very nice fellow. We spent a lot of time on the phone, talked about bikes and all that. And he goes,
Yeah.
I don't have any answer for you, but I will tell you that you can get material caught down in some of those passages, and we had a long talk. Anyway, the way I cured the problem is I bought 2 new carbs from BMW because I could not get these to have proper cold start enrichment. It would crank and crank and crank and crank and crank. And so this is one of those carbs that had that issue, and I went through it completely. Back to that in a second. But so this little disc, you notice, is spring-loaded. If you carefully pull this up, use your finger, use a plastic tool like that, you can, if you look at the back of that, this is, maybe I can do it with these just so I can pass this around. Under here, there's actually, those orifices go to a little channel that's machined out of this. So you want to make sure that when you take this, when you clean this, pop that up, spray that all out with solvent, clean that all out so you don't have any junk or anything in there. Really important. I don't take these apart. I guess you could. There's a little pin that retains that. But the only thing I'm really after is I'm after this O-ring, and I'm after this gasket here. This is the gasket you have a lot of problems with. I have it glued on the end. What will happen with these is these get sucked into this port because you have high vacuum on it, and you'll have fuel leaking out of it, and you'll have some running issues. Yours looks like it's leaking right from that. So that's basically that. And this is the housing. You can see how kind of sooted up that is already, right? Because it's sucking fuel, sucking air. You got crankcase vapors recirculating. It just gets stuff in it. So that's really essentially the cold start mechanism. Make sure I blow solvent through all these holes. Make sure all that's okay. Change the gaskets. We've got that all apart. Again, the throttle shaft we didn't take out. The other thing to look at is you have idle air that goes through these little ports. Make sure that, see that little brass port? That's where these magic straw things are great. Blow through there, make sure that's good. blow through all these ports in here, and just kind of look in there and make sure you have no junk in there. And what I do then, once I've made sure it's fairly cleaned out, I'll put it in the carb solvent if it's really dirty and clean it. If it's a condition like this, I'm just putting new O-rings in it and putting it back together, you know. This piece, you don't really have to, you almost have to take it off the bike. It's quicker to take this off, but you can do all the rest of those O-rings and that diaphragm with this in situation. You don't have to take it off the bike. It can be right
You
there.
mentioned to me that if you've got a really dirty old carb, after you do all this, then you'll put it in the carb bath and let it sit for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Then you take it in with soapy water and rinse the bejesus out of it.
That's
And then
what I do.
And then you bake it in the oven.
I do. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sorry. Thanks for bringing that up. So on the Berryman Chem Tool, the soak stuff I use, they say no more than 3 hours for aluminum, and that's usually what I do. And then I take that, I bring it in. I do that in the barn, so I don't bring it in the house. I have big 2-quart Ziploc bags. I take the thing and I just put all the parts in those Ziploc bags, bring it in the kitchen sink, turn the water up so it's warm and I can stand it. And I just take each part and I run it under there. I usually take soap, put soap on it to kind of dissolve it. On the top of the Berryman Chem Clean, there's an oil barrier so the stuff doesn't evaporate quickly, and that's what you get on all the parts when you take them out. Should wear gloves. I should probably wear gloves today, but I don't have any solvent. I'm a big fan of wearing gloves when you're doing stuff. And then when I'm all done with that, I still blow things out with solvent when I put it back on my bench. But I take all those parts, I put them on a cookie tray, and I put it in the oven at a lowest setting I can for 15, 20 minutes. It evaporates everything off it. You'll notice sometimes what will happen is the aluminum will start to turn white and oxidize because you're kind of taking all the oils out of it. I usually will wipe it down with stuff and kind of make it like a cleaner, WD-40, something like that to lubricate it. And then I just blow everything out with solvent again after it comes out of there to make sure it's clean. And then I start putting it back together. And things that we talked about, that had Loctite on them, which were these screws here, I use them. Yeah. So I use the 242. This thing I've been using either the Loctite or this old school. I don't know if you've seen this stuff. Yeah, with the picture of the girl writing this almost looks like rubber cement from when we were in grade school. That's what it looks like. So it seems to last forever. You're only taking very little bit of it just to make it tacky. So that's essentially the carb. I can always just say, like the Germans say, assembly is the reverse. But questions on any of that stuff, gentlemen? Comments? You guys have done some of these.
The last step for me will be Bruce.
Oh, I'm happy to help you out. So this is literally a box of Bing parts that I bought over the last year or so, year and a half, and there's your new throttle pieces. That stuff's fairly inexpensive for me, and I figure like, hey, if I'm doing this thing and my name's on it, I want it to look good and I want to feel good. And I don't want to take it apart again for 3 or 4 years and go, I should have changed that screw. So
I'm the same way as I'm redoing this R80 with this custom build. Often I'm ordering, especially for the stuff that's a couple bucks here, a couple bucks there. I figure I'm just collecting parts for somewhere down the road, hoping I have another Airhead or two. But I'll often buy 2 of what I need.
Yep.
Or I need 1, but I'll buy 2 or 3. And just kind of have stuff laying around.
Yeah, when I was at the Firearms Academy, one thing they told us is if you shoot 100 rounds, you buy 200 rounds. It was a discipline thing, so you never run out of ammo. But same way, if I order something, I'll order 2 of them, right? And then I have a spare one because I'm probably going to have a problem with it again. Biggest thing on these things, they're not hard to do. Take your time. You actually have one that's assembled. Use that as your model. Use this diagram. I can talk a lot more about theory, but I have to tell you this little handout that I had here.
Is this?
Yep.
It says Type 94, but
they're almost the same. They're almost identical.
6432s are still going to be basically the same.
Yep. And if you're really into theory, that handout from that aviation company, Rainbow Aviation, phenomenally well done. It's basically teaching aircraft technicians how to rebuild these carburetors. It talks a lot about theory, right? So I have 15 or 16 people that work with me in my business, and we have an apprentice program. And one of the first things I always tell my apprentices, you can't fix anything if you don't understand how it works. So you need to learn the theory first, and then it makes a lot more sense to you. It becomes a lot more rewarding, right? If you're a parts changer, you're going to be there all day. But if you understand, hey, this is leaking fuel. What could leak fuel? Well, this enrichment gasket can leak fuel, or that. So that's fundamentally the carbs. I'd like for you to take them off your bike if you like, and and you can work on this side. I can put my stuff in a baggie and put back together later. Depending on what you have for clamps, if you have the original clamps, this is my secret tool for taking those off. And if you have one of these.
Just to,
This is a German company called Worth, and this is a little 7-liter head for the factory hose clamps on those. If yours are still stock, then that'll take those off. It's a lot better than a screwdriver, which is going to slip and all that. So you're welcome to take those off. Do you feel comfortable doing those? You want me over there with you?
Oh yeah,
or?
no, I can take them off.
Okay, yeah, pretty straightforward. And then we'll look at your boots when they come off. We'll put it here, and then I'll have you take it apart. You can use all my tools and
Great,
and all
thank
that.
you.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
So I'll give you that. You have the sacred tool. You know all the story. You're gonna have gas all over, right? And so in a float bowl.
Not my garage.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, guys. I'm gonna turn this over to Mark to let him pull it off his, and then we'll play his apart.